In 1944, they closed the brothels on the grounds that civilians had come back into control. The war was wrapping up, and most of the military was no longer in Hawaii. They were in the Western Pacific. And so at this point, there had been a story in Life magazine or Time magazine about open prostitution in Hawaii and blah, blah, blah. And they showed pictures of lines of sailors and men in uniform every morning lined up to get into these brothels. And so people were really mad because they wanted the tourism to come back after the war and blah, blah, blah. And so the local community now decided they'd close the brothels because it was bad for our image. And so September 44, they closed the brothels. But what they didn't do was close the vice district. So basically from 1940s until the late 1970s, you had pretty much a tolerated vice district in Chinatown.
Meaning they were okay with it?
When I came to Hawaii in the 70s, if someone said Hotel Street,
no. Were you trafficked here?
As a student,
okay.
You said Hotel Street, and people said, "Ah, well, we know what that means.
Totally.
It means everything that adult-oriented thing you could want: prostitution, gambling, drugs, which was primarily marijuana until more recently, adult movie stores, peep shows, strip clubs. It was all in that area, and it was tolerated because there was no other reason to be down there at night. We didn't have residents like we do today. It was a district that was pretty much a vice district. And it worked for a lot of people in the community because people didn't want that, just didn't go there. Hello?
Okay, you could avoid it.
You could avoid
just
it
like
very
if you don't
easily.
like it, change the channel.
Then unfortunately, in the late 70s and into the 1980s, and I don't know all the details, but apparently landowners and people down there felt that money could be made by redeveloping and inventing Chinatown and building these nice new buildings and bringing in businesses and bringing in, all these middle-class people. And
dates with a lot of money.
And the problem with that is those people don't want to live in a vice district. And there was no thought concerned to the people who wanted vice. I mean, they were just viewed as non-persons. And that's pretty much where we have today. And the situation's gotten worse as you have this conflict between one group of people who doesn't want a vice district and the people who've been going there, not the same people, but people have been going there for decades to get a certain type of adult service.
Yeah. Service. So then there's a lot of groups that are trying to help sex workers now, but because the U.S. is so puritanical when it comes to sex, they've kind of cut off funding for a lot of groups that were servicing people that may have chosen or resorted to sex work, correct?
Well, yeah, I think what we're talking about is what's happening internationally.
Yeah.
The United States is a big player financially in global foreign aid. We're a wealthy country, and we're generous, And since the 1980s, we've been a leader in funding money to fight AIDS and other situations around the world. And a lot of really good foreign organizations have grown up in the last 20, 25 years that deal with public health, such as the Durabar organization in West Bengal. The problem that the U.S. has more recently had with a lot of these organizations is a lot of these organizations are founded with or rely heavily on sex workers as members and as outreach workers and as part of the solution to the problem.
To help themselves.
Yeah, and Durabar, for example, has 65,000 sex workers in this organization. So this is an organization of 65,000 people who sell sex.
For us, by us.
Yeah, and they have been very much the leader in their area in terms of both AIDS and in fighting abuse of people, trafficking, underage people. They report that because of their involvement, they've been able to reduce the percentage of underage people in the sex industry in their area from about 25% in the 1990s to about 3% today. Largely,
so they've been successul.
Yeah, they've been very successful at fighting the very problems that the U.S. is all complaining about trafficking and stuff. But the U.S. put in a pledge into receiving any U.S. money, saying that any organization who receives the money has to sign a pledge says that they will never advocate or support the decriminalization or legalization of prostitution, because the U.S. is on a moral crusade to abolish prostitution. As a result, a lot of the best organizations in the world which are dealing with the very issues have been defunded by U.S. sources, which is a big section of their money. And so it's made it very difficult for them to go and find the other money. At the same time, the U.S., since the Bush administration, has been looking for anybody who has kind of a moral crusade and funded them, these faith-based people. And I have no problem with faith-based issues. I've believe in faith myself. However, my problem is that a lot of times groups and organizations that are out there may have a nice moral faith-based attitude, but they have no real understanding of prostitution, the sex industry. They're not streetwise. They have no social background in social work. And these groups are the ones who are lining up now to get money, where professional organizations, which have all those qualities, are fighting for every last dime.
Yeah,
and this is very bad for the people that are being serviced.
Because it's not, well, I have a quote from Hazera Bagum. She's a member of Bangladesh's Durjoy Nari Shango. And they were, I guess, some organization that received a lot of money until they had to take this anti-prostitution pledge, which I think maybe they rejected.
I think they did.
And now they're trying to do it on their own, which isn't very easy. They used to have 20 drop-in centers, but now they just have 4 places. Quoting her, she said,
"The monthly condom distribution rate used to be very high, but since the closings there is less access, so sex workers are not using as many condoms. They distribute fewer each month. After the USAID funding stopped coming, and when all of our centers closed in December of 2005, some girls came in just to utilize our child care center. When they would come in, they would say, 'We need to talk to someone. We need condoms. We need many things, like education, so we can practice safer sex.' We are really in trouble. Since we have been forced to close our centers, we have lost our community. We are nowhere now. It feels as if our family has been broken because our sex workers are street-based. They're just floating now. The only homes they had sometimes was when they would go with a client for a few hours while they were working. The rest of the time, the only homes they had were the drop-in centers. Closing the centers is like losing their homes, their meeting places, losing their health clinics, school, losing everything. They are forced to run from person to person, organization to organization, trying to communicate these problems. What do I do? Where can I go? Where can I eat, sleep, take a bath, use the toilet? This is the painful situation we are in now, that all of the centers have been closed. I believe this is what a broken heart feels like."
Well, it's a big problem, because social service organizations with professional competence, which use former sex industry workers and people who've had addiction and things as mentors and things like that, they practice a harm reduction strategy, which is effective rather than a moral judgmental strategy, so that the person who's engaging in the risky behavior is now part of the solution rather than seen as the other, the client, someone to be judged and shown the right path.
So it's help yourself, like
yeah,
learn
it's like
what's...
You learn, for example, using condoms is a perfect example of harm reduction. For a harm reduction, giving condoms to a sex worker makes sense, because you've reduced the harm that she's likely to experience in her work.
She may have chosen to do it, or
and
may have no
willing,
choice.
She can see the value in it, because it's saving her life and protecting her life, but it's also protecting all of the other potential sex partners that her Johns might have, which could be hundreds of other people. So harm reductionist sees this as a good way of abusing things, of using things. The moral absolutist organizations say, no, 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 no. You have to make them stop doing the behavior. Stop using drugs. Stop being a prostitute. Stop doing this, or you're wrong, and you need to be sanctioned in some way. And that's a very different approach, and it's not the right approach. When people are willing and ready to give up drugs, or give up prostitution, or give up gambling, whatever it is, that's the time that they need the social services. And in those times, the existing social services are inadequate. So what we should be doing is we should be providing a full complement of social services.
Can we see the graphic? There's a lot of groups, yeah?